to hate fire drills. In fact, I honestly still do. I'm just going out on a limb, and I'm just going to guess that everybody watching tonight also hates fire drills, that no one really likes them. And in fact, they do more harm than good. You might be in that camp. And you're just sitting there in class, right? Just minding your own business, maybe coloring inside the lines, maybe humming to yourself. And then all of a sudden, this ear-splitting noise that could actually raise Lazarus from the grave. That's my Wake the Dead joke. And you just about lose all composure and embarrass yourself by jumping out of your seat and running in a big panic. See, I mean, how are we really supposed to calmly collect ourselves in an orderly fashion and then move out of the building, all in this single file line with our classmates, when we're just filled with that much panic? In fact, they tell you not to panic, but you just can't help it. When I was a kid, and still to this day, I can feel loud noises. I don't know if you understand what that phrase means, but to someone with maybe some ADHD, everything comes into our brains at the same volume level. Everything. If you've ever seen me after service talking to me and my head starts to pull towards another direction, it's not that I'm not listening to you or it's not entertaining or you're not engaging. It's like I'm actually listening to multiple conversations that are happening all around me at once. It's hard for me to focus on one single conversation. In fact, I've been known to answer a question in a conversation that I'm not even in from across the room because I just hear it and that's how my brain works. So panic absolutely sets in because all noises are louder in my head. We've all been in the panic stage before. Our heart rate elevates, our adrenaline is pumping, and we just jump out of our skin. Panic's not fun. Panic can cripple some people. The same things happen in our life when we focus on the negative. And over the last week, we've been talking about these ruts that form in our brains and actually develop the way we process and think. And Ryan led us through a self-awareness exercise last week to help us become self-aware, and that leads us to an honest assessment of our thinking. Negative thinking is the default for most of us, my life included. You ever heard this saying, keep your expectations low and you'll always be surprised? That was a popular saying when I was a kid, and always seeing the negative in our life forms these ruts that are the hardest kind to get out of. Your thoughts lead your life. Having negative thoughts means we lead a negative life. When we all focus on the negative, all we see is the negative. Things may happen in our life and they're just unrelated to anything, but we are stuck in a negative thought pattern, so we form the assumption that the situation happened for a reason. Someone is late picking you up, and we think they did it on purpose because they don't respect us. The utility company messed up our bill and charged us too much one month, and we jumped to the conclusion that they did it on purpose so they could get more money out of us. See, the point is that when we look for the negative in life, that's all we're going to see, the negative. And that leaves us with nothing to look forward to. Now, that rut might sound familiar to us because it should. We've lived there for the past 2 years. Take away all the good intentions of keeping people safe and healthy. I'm not talking about those things, but what I do want to push into is about this unintentional consequence that was the byproduct of these good intentions. The COVID fatigue, right? We all got tired at some point, and it just became negative noise in the background of our life. For those of us not in healthcare, we grew tired of it. For those of us in healthcare, we grew tired of it, but had to put the smile on our face for our patients because it was even harder. Proverbs 17 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit saps a person's strength." Now, the writer of Proverbs knows that negative thoughts will only drain a person mentally. It tires us and makes us all too easy to stay in that rut. We know this, and there's a reason for it. See, in your brain, you have something called the amygdala. It's a part of the brain that regulates your adrenaline. It's in charge of your fight or flight response. Now, a lot of the times, our amygdala has been hijacked. We know that from our own experiences, where you just want to run or you just want to fight. It releases the same amount of adrenaline every time, regardless of the situation that you are physically in, which is why you go into panic mode when the situation doesn't call for it. Daydreams turn to worry, and worry keeps you up at night. It's because to your amygdala, it doesn't know the difference between your thoughts and what is actually happening in the real world, what you're physically going through. Now, have you ever gone something so stressful and you made it out on the other side? You survived and it's over. It doesn't have to be traumatic, but it works the same. You could be years down the road from this experience and you start to think about it. You remember the situation and you remember how you felt and what you experienced. And then all of a sudden, a sense of panic follows that. But you know, part of your brain knows that you are safe in this moment. But the problem is, your amygdala doesn't. It doesn't have a memory. It senses that you are going through it right now. And you can trick it. A small memory can bring you back to the rush of adrenaline like it was happening all over again. Like you're reliving that, and now you have this sense of panic. Negative thoughts cause us to use our amygdala more than it should. The part of your brain that functions well is the prefrontal cortex. This is what it's designed to do. It's the rational part of your brain, and it evaluates situations based on logic and not emotions. But that rush of adrenaline moves that situation from the prefrontal cortex to the lower brain, where the fight or flight response lives. There's no logic there. The more you use your amygdala, the bigger it gets. It's like a muscle. It will grow over time if the demand on it is great. So those ruts that we get trapped in get deeper and deeper. But science has given us this peek into the way God's designed all of this to work. See, there's two things that are true here that science has backed up. And the first one is we can actually shrink the amygdala by not allowing it to control our thoughts. By taking back the panic and allowing the prefrontal cortex to think through a situation with logic removed from emotion. And the second is that we can actually rewire our neural pathways in the brain. Meaning that we can rewire the prefrontal cortex to have the coping skills needed to handle the situation without giving control over to the amygdala. Because that's the easy thing to do. Which means you and I have the power to bring peace into our life instead of panic. Now, have you ever been hijacked, your amygdala that is, and in a heated situation and made a good decision? Usually not. When our amygdala is hijacked, we usually make rash decisions, quick decisions. And that's because we're using a part of the brain where the logic doesn't live. We know this is not good for our minds, that the thoughts we think determine the future we live. Jesus said in Matthew, "Can all your worries add a single moment to your life?" And the answer he's looking for is no. But then why do we do it? Why we want to know the future, but we just don't have the capability of knowing it. So let's take example of worry. Worry steals from the joy of today by being afraid of tomorrow. It says to be afraid of what the future brings because it's the unknown. With all the uncertainty, it's just too much to handle. So we fixate on the negative of the future because that's all we know to do. We're drawn to that. It's a safety mechanism. So worry not only takes and does not give anything to our lives. It doesn't add anything. It's the landlord that you pay rent to but doesn't fix the place up. So how do we get out of that rut? We have to change the way we think. It's part of that rewiring process. We have to first stop the thought that we are having at the moment and replace it with something completely new, something from God. If we replace worry in our life with worship, we begin to shift the way we think. This is called reframing. Just simply reframing your thoughts. Now, in the past of this series, we've kept a journal of our thoughts to keep track of when and how often we find ourselves focused on the negative, and we've journaled down what those negative thoughts are. And most of the time, we see that they are just lies that we've believed somewhere in our life. Whether somebody told us or a situation, we interpreted it that way, that lie has shaped and trained the way we think And it becomes much easier to stay in that rut because the amygdala is in charge. Being self-aware enough to know when we are in that rut is half the battle. Reframing your thoughts, that's the next step. You have to replace the lie with a truth. In order to grow through this, when we remove that lie, we have to be intentional with what goes in its place. When the lie is about you and the foundation of your character, you can't just take it out and expect nothing to fill that void that's left. And if we aren't intentional about what goes back in its place, we might let another lie just come in and make its home. Just trading lies about ourselves. That's not the purpose of a fulfilled life. But in fact, God's plan for you is that you become the best version of you. Not just trading the mediocre for some more mundane. But Jesus once told his disciples in John, he says, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." We've all heard this at some point in our life. It might have been in the context of the Bible, or our culture has just honestly latched onto this, the truth will set you free. And they've used this phrase in a lot of places. But the context is the same. The truth will set you free. That's absolutely correct. There is nothing that God desires more than to set people free from being slaves to the lies that they believed. But something that the truth does is it breaks those chains, and then we rejoice. The truth smashes the lies, and we immediately feel relief. But then something else that the truth does is we're left feeling wrecked or caught off guard by that. See, let me back it up. Most of the time when the truth comes up against a lie that's foundational to your belief system, it makes you feel uncomfortable before it sets you free. The after effect of the truth setting us free, that's what we desire. But this pain and this discomfort that's caused because we have to take an honest assessment of ourselves in order to let the truth set us free, that's not what most of us want to do. The truth pushes us to change and grow, to reframe our mind. You and I need to reframe our past by looking at it through the lens of God's goodness. And we start by searching for God's presence in our life. Examining every moment that we have experienced and framed as negative. Looking for God in those. Because I promise you, He was there. If you're taking an honest assessment of them and you truly look for God, you're going to find Him. You're going to find Him in those situations. You'll find that God has been by your side through some pretty big moments in your life. Once we've done that, we need to acknowledge the times God has fought for you and appreciate them. Now let me tell you, to realize that you're not alone and that someone is on your side and has your back, that's the biggest confidence boost a person could experience. Once you start looking for God's goodness in your life, you'll be surprised and you'll actually start to see it in other places. That first one, that's going to be tough. Moments will flood into your memory of other times that God has been with you after you grasp that first moment. And it'll surprise you. And that is the truth burning away at those lies. Some of those lies were forced upon you, not by you, but maybe by other people or other situations. The frame that you see the world through will dictate the path that you choose. The frame is important. It keeps everything focused. And if we frame every outcome as negative, our brain will be hardwired for panic. But if we frame our life in the hope and blessings of God, our mind will begin to be transformed and rewired. So why not pre-frame our experiences? Instead of looking for the negative to happen in your future, what would happen if we just stopped? Have you ever been dreading a date on the calendar? Like something future, you've written it down on the calendar and you're just dreading that date. Like you know it's coming up. Maybe it's an anniversary of something that you don't wish to experience, or you have an important meeting, or maybe it's a doctor's appointment where there's going to be some big heavy stuff talked about, or maybe a test at school or something that you're just not looking forward to, right? And you wake up grumpy. Your anxiety has framed your day in the negative before the day even started. And now you run the risk of finding everything you didn't want to find. I know you've been there because I've been there. You wake up and tell yourself it's going to be a bad day. Let's just get through it. And then you're surprised when you actually have a bad day. You framed it that way before you even got up. But what would happen if the first thing you did was invite God into maybe a potentially stressful day before the stress ever begins? In the quiet, before the life starts to turn busy, pre-frame your day with hope and praise before you navigate the day, and you'll find that you can smoothly navigate the challenges you might face. Pre-framing our life circumstances with praise and hope actually sets us up for future successes. Starting with hope instead of resorting to hope after the negative has occurred, that's what we're talking about. I would rather start with the praise beforehand. It's much wiser, and it comes with way less heartache to start with praise instead of going through a reframing process where we have to sort out our baggage and repack our bags with praise. Because I bet that we all have enough regrets, and we just don't have time to keep sorting that baggage out. So let's pre-frame instead of reframe. Move to a proactive, not a reactive. And you and I were created to be people of worship. What we actually give our attention to gets our worship. That means if we are only focusing on the negative in our life, then we are truly living a life where we have placed our victimhood on a pedestal, and we're kind of worshiping that. I had a friend once that every time I called to check in on him, they had the same story. I love this guy. I've known him since middle school. I still keep in touch with him today, and I watched him get married and have kids, and he watched me do the same thing and watched each other start our lives and pushing into the future. But every time I touched base with him, life was always throwing him something, a curveball. There was just something that wasn't going right for him or his family. And I get that. That's what friends do. We support each other. But after a while, I begin to feel that that's all he was focusing on. And I kind of got tired of hearing it. I grew tired of pointing out the good in his life and the fact that sometimes life is just hard and these are all obstacles and challenges and it's the hard things in life that are honestly worth doing, that our dreams aren't supposed to be easy. But he didn't see it that way. He honestly valued victimhood in his life, and that rut only demands more and more self-sacrifice to an altar that gives you nothing in return. And too many of us willingly walk around in that, myself included. I catch myself sometimes when I'm asked how I'm doing, and I reply with oh, I'm okay. Things could be better. Well, things could always be better, no matter where you are at in life. That's just a fact for all of us, but it's a loose definition of success. That's not quantitative. It's actually subjective. Anything is better than what we're living now, but that's not the point. The point is life, it will always be life. It's full of ups and downs and the known and the unknown. It's full of surprises. Some of those surprises are beautiful and some of them are messy. But at the end of it, some things we just have no control over. But you know the one thing you have control over through any situation, be it good or bad? And that's your character. It's the only thing you have control over. And we're made for worship. The more we fixate on the negative, the more good we miss out in our lives. We're not made to worry. Jesus says in Matthew, no one can serve two masters. For you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. And that is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life. Whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear, isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to them than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? And why worry about your clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing, yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully about wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, He will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? So don't worry about these things, saying, what will we eat? What will we drink? What will we wear? These things will dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, but your heavenly Father already knows all of your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and live righteously. He will give you everything you need. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble, that's enough for today. You can't serve the worry in your life and God at the same time. You can serve worry in your life by worrying some more, or you can serve the God of your life by moving to that place of worship. That is the desire I have for everyone, that we would be filled with praise, because something transforms in our mind when we worship. Remember that I said that we can actually rewire that prefrontal cortex of our brain? This is how. It's through worship. Studies have been conducted on what worship and prayer do to our brain waves. And you know what they found? They actually found that prayer and worship actually changes the chemistry in the brain and pushes it to a more positive makeup. Prayer and worship strengthen your prefrontal cortex, which in turn keeps your amygdala from overworking itself. That's fantastic. If you're going to put your security in something, then you need to put it in something that can never be taken from you. You can lose your health, you can lose your job, you can lose your good looks, hopefully not mine, but you can lose your family, you can lose your life, and you can lose your mind. You can even lose your way. God, however, He's never lost. And there is nothing you need that God can't supply. When we worry, we are wrestling with the question of whether or not God is truly with us. Is He really here in this situation? Now, worship answers that question by moving us into His presence, where all lies and negative thoughts can be sorted out in a healthy manner. This is the rejoice principle, meaning that if we truly want to win the war in our minds, we have to move to a place where you and I rejoice in honestly every circumstance. 1 Thessalonians, Paul says, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ. Being thankful in every circumstance brings something called gratitude along with it. Being thankful for everything, including the bad, we are actually reframing every circumstance that we have inside of God's complete and perfect will. It's not easy, but God is always working. Rejoicing with prayer and praise, that's going to guard our mind against these negative thought attacks that Satan throws at you. So here's this week's homework. Over the next week, I just ask that you take worship serious. Even when you are by yourself, the times where we feel like we have nothing to be thankful for, those are actually the best times that we should worship. So turn the page in your journal where you've been keeping all of your thought patterns and all of those routines of when and where they pop up, and start on a brand new page. And I want you to instead not track the negative that your mind fixates on, but I want you instead to make a list of things that you're grateful for. And this might be challenging. And that's because our ruts and our minds have been wired to always look at these negative thought patterns. But by taking the time and intentionally forcing our mind to remember these things that we're grateful for, that's when we rewire the brain. So turn that page. And on that page, at the end of every day, write down 7 things that you're grateful for. And then make sure that you tell God those things that you're grateful for. And you know what you need to tell Him? Thanks. It's one thing to write the list and close the book and just put it on the nightstand and go to bed. It's another thing to write the list and then have that conversation with God and rejoice in the role God played in each one of those things. God is good and He's always working. And then you close the book. Now do that every day for the next week and just see what happens. Make sure you find 7 new things to be grateful for every day. And those 7 things could be simple. They could be big. If you're wondering what to even write down, you maybe got a list of 5 and you need 2 more. Make them simple. Is it your health? Is it your kids? Is it your job? Is it the breath in your lungs? Is it maybe completing something that you've been working on for a long time? Is it maybe the fact that you woke up this morning and got to see the sunrise and it was just beautiful? Whatever it is, thank God for it. Even the small ones. Thank God for His role in winning the war for your mind. Then and only then, that's the only way we can rewire and transform the way we think. Now let's do this together. Let's build healthier mindsets for us as individuals and encourage the people around us to do the same. Because when we're healthy, that's contagious. And be sure to thank God for every moment of those days. I'm excited to see what God's going to bring to mind. So take this time and in your groups, I'm going to pause my portion of the conversation. You guys pick up yours and just make a list together right now. What are you thankful for? All right, guys, we'll see you next week. God bless.